Hi, my name is Valerie and today we're filming from my bathroom because I'm going to do what everybody has been waiting for. I'm actually going to repot these two orchids. So we have in front of us Oncidium and Pleatum orchids, and they're also called the dancing lady orchids. They usually have these beautiful, I guess you could call them canes, of these just little waterfalls of yellow flowers that look like dancing ladies or also butterflies. So as you can see, this is not the best setup for any orchid or any plant. The bottom of this, because it's just a bottle top, is very thin, and now that these orchids are getting a lot bigger, it's much easier to knock them over, and it's hard to get them to want to stand up on their own. As you can see, the top of these two roots right here are really dark, and that's because there's a bunch of fungus that's been growing on them. But then if you look down the sides, it turns much more light colored and white. And if you get them wet, they still green up, which means that they're working and they're healthy. So I don't know how bad this fungus is going to affect these plants, but if I move them into a different medium, maybe it will cause that fungus to clear up and not be on those roots anymore or spread. So step number 1 started about 3 days ago. I took the container portion of my pot and I just measured out how many pebbles that I wanted to fill this pot. And then I put it in the reservoir portion of my pot because why not? And then I filled it with water. And that serves 2 purposes. 1, you're washing off all that clay dust, which is good because if that clay dust coats the roots of your orchid, it will prevent your orchid from absorbing the water it needs. And 2, it just pre-soaks your pebbles so that when you're putting your pot together, it works right from the get-go. So I have my garbage can, I have one of my orchids, just because there's less roots all over the place on this one, and I'm going to unpot this orchid. Take out my little tab, which was stuck to a root. Very interesting. And then I'm just gonna see if I can wiggle it out. I guess it was more stuck than I thought it was. And that's why we have this in the bathtub, because sometimes pieces are going to fall out and then you can just put them back in. There we go. There. Can you see all of that just broken down debris and probably some mold in there from being in a wet situation with bark? Kind of gross. Now I have repotted these orchids into this medium and the same pots twice since I first got them, and we'll just loosen up what we can. And there have been times where I actually found little mushrooms. This is why I want to put it in a different medium. And we're just going to keep loosening to the best of our ability without snapping the roots, because as you can see, even though they're kind of thick looking, compared to other orchids, the roots are much thinner. But I've chosen the end of March to be the time that I repot this, because in the springtime, at least for me in the springtime, these orchids like to create more roots. And if they're in the process of creating new roots, that is going to help them with adapting to a new environment. And having a more airy substrate like these pebbles, there's not such a dense amount in these pebbles, then it will be able to adapt better to having all that extra air and dryness around the roots. So now that I got all of the pieces out of my roots, I rinsed them off just to try and get any extras out. And now I am going to look at my roots and see what is dead and what is alive. As you can see, we have these beautiful, nice white roots here. This, because it's been wet, is a little bit green. And then we also have these roots over here, which are much more dark colored, more of a tan, less white. So these roots are alive and these roots are dead. This one here actually has a little section that's kind of green and firm, so that might be alive. But the growing tip on the end, it's very squishy, it's kind of see-through, it's tan, and I don't think that's alive, so this root won't grow anymore. So I don't mind cutting off this root and the other roots in here that are very similar to that. So I have these little nail scissors here, and these are helpful for getting into all the little crevices and just cutting what I need and not accidentally getting something I don't need. So now that I've cut out all of those dead roots that were right in here, it looks a lot better, doesn't it? Now we get to the fun part, and that's actually putting the orchid inside the pot. So first, you take some of your pebbles and you carefully put it in the bottom. Remember, you have your little piece of mesh at the bottom to prevent the pebbles from falling out, so make sure that doesn't move on it. And then you just kind of center your orchid how you want it to look, and then fill in around the edges. So after I finished with my first plant, I went to start on my second plant, and as I was trimming the roots, it just kind of fell apart on me. So I have a feeling these weren't actually connected together when I first got it. It was always kind of loose every time I went to move it, but I have a feeling that there were just enough roots tangled together that it just held together. So I cut a supporting root that was not actually attaching these two together, and it just fell apart. So I actually have 3 orchids now. I am going to plant these 2 in the same pot because in general this grouping was smaller anyway, but it's always a nice surprise when you find out you have more orchids than you originally thought. So now that we're done with both of our plants, I have to remind you that when you finish working with your first plant, disinfect all your surfaces and tools before working with your second plant to prevent disease transfer. So now all you have to do is fill up your reservoir, wipe off any water from the plants themselves, put them in your favorite window, and let the roots adapt to their new environment. I hope this has helped you with your repotting adventures. I hope you have a nice rest of your day and happy orchid potting!